Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Shoreline Morning Show. My name is Emmy, and I'm your host. And hello, welcome to my guest today. Today, for the first time ever, I have our head honcho, Pastor Eric Parton, on. Woo! And Pastor Eric, would you actually introduce our other guest?
Yes, so we have a surprise, and I wanted to announce it first to our morning show viewers online and everybody that's in the building now. You're going to hear this. The church doesn't even know it because we love you so much. We wanted to hear it first. But sitting next to me is Pastor Carolyn Hare, and she is our new youth pastor for Shoreline Church.
So excited to be here. Thank you.
So we fired Matt because you're a lot better looking.
No.
I know. Matt is still our children's pastor. We're just at that place where we're growing as a church that we can specialize, and so we brought in the best, Carolyn. So make
Yes,
sure you
we did.
introduce. We're actually going to talk about this at church next week. So you guys here at the morning show got the sneak preview. So
Yeah, a special preview. And actually, I thought it would be fun for us today to just kind of get to know you a little bit. So
Getting to know you.
Yes, exactly.
Getting to know all about you.
So I'm just going to ask some questions,
pretty
and we're
good.
just going to kind of talk through
Okay.
them. So this is kind of a very important first question.
Yes.
Who was your first celebrity crush?
Okay, so JTT. Anybody know? who
Jonathan
Taylor Thomas. He was on Home Improvement. Yes. Yes. So I watched that with my family, and I had a huge poster, the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
Yeah.
What about you, Eric?
Well, y'all won't know who this is, but some of the older people will. Her name was Valerie Bertinelli. She married Eddie Van Halen.
Okay.
She was on the show. What was it? Name of that show?
One
Day at a time.
One
One
day
day
at
at
a
a
time.
time.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was so mad when she married Eddie Van Halen. But if you're gonna marry someone, Eddie Van
Makes
Halen was
sense.
pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's fair.
Yeah.
Also, this is kind of important. Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I am definitely an extrovert.
Okay.
Like, that is, I get my energy from being with people. I love being around people. Like, when I'm in meetings all day long, like, I need to go be out later.
Yeah. What about you, Eric?
Yeah.
What do you think?
All right, this is kind of hard because on one hand, I totally see that you get energized by people, but I also know you love your like one-on-one,
Alone
like
time,
fishing
right?
time,
Yeah.
like all
I'm
of
getting
that.
more introverted as I get older.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Same.
but mainly an extrovert, I guess.
Yeah. All right, this one's hard hitting, guys. All right, is cereal a soup?
I believe that it is.
What?
I believe cereal is a soup. There are cold soups in the world.
There are.
And it's just, you put all different ingredients in a soup, like different vegetables that you want. You put
Milk is
different
just the broth?
ingredients. It's just the broth. That is it.
Caitlin's my assistant. Could you add this on the interview questions? When you're interviewing
That
for
wasn't
future
a part of the
employees?
interview.
Because let me just ask you another question. Is it a unexpected kiss or a
Unforeseen,
unforeseen
or
kiss
sloppy
or a
wet?
sloppy wet kiss?
Sloppy wet.
Okay, your job's good.
Okay,
then.
I'm good. I'm safe.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you think it's a soup?
Of course not.
Okay, I didn't think
It
so.
is
I just-
all-around great food. You can have it for breakfast, dessert, late at night. You can have nutritious
I
cereal
hate
like
cereal.
Mueslix or whatever.
Personally, I
but
would
then Lucky
agree.
Charms is like eating dessert.
Yes, this
Yeah.
is true. That's a huge
And
pro.
then you drink the milk up at the end.
All right, next question. What is the weirdest thing you've ever smelled?
Smelled?
Yes. I know it's very specific, but
Okay,
I'm curious.
so it's very strange to me. So I love to go to Tanzania in Africa, and I love to go to Albania in Europe to
Albania
do mission work.
is on the Adriatic.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
It's beautiful. But the weird thing is, about 3 days into using their water, it starts to smell like gasoline in the bathrooms. It's real
Interesting.
weird.
Wow.
And they're not even related.
So that would be the weirdest.
It's weird. It's very strange.
I'm not even listening to you. I'm trying to think of the
Yeah, I was
weirdest
gonna
thing I've
say
ever
the look on your face looks like you're like traumatized just thinking about this question.
Yeah, I don't know.
Middle
That's okay,
school
we
boys,
can-
Oh, I know.
maybe?
Okay.
I was down in Ecuador.
Okay.
And we were going down the beach because the road was washed out. So the bus is driving down the beach, and we drove by an anchovy factory.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, it was horrible.
I bet that was ripe.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah.
All right. And I just have to know if if animals could talk, which I mean I think they have their own little language, but if they could speak English, which animal do you think would be the rudest?
I think it'd be a toss-up between a cat and an ostrich.
Yes.
Ostriches, I mean, they're just a little intimidating in general, but
Mm-hmm. They're
they just
so
kind
big.
of, they're big, they screech, they have very sassy faces. Like,
Same.
I mean, they just are like,
Yep.
I don't know.
I think it'd be the emu on that commercial, that insurance commercial.
Oh,
The
yeah.
yellow one, whatever that is.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
He's rude.
Oh.
I think cats maybe a little bit too, because I mean, there's some good cats, but there's also some real sassy cats.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Y'all don't remember the Far Side cartoons? Anybody remember
I
Far
don't.
Side?
Our
In
audience
one of the
definitely
Far
does.
Side comics, it had this guy who was super excited because he finally invented a helmet that would interpret dog talk, what they were saying. And he puts it on and found out what dogs were saying, and all they were saying was, hey, 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 hey. And they only knew one word, hey, hey, hey.
I like the one from Up. Whenever is that the one? Yeah,
I
Up
think
where
so, yeah.
where it's translating and it's just like squirrel and all of that stuff. I feel like that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna ask one more question before we wrap up. And this actually I found out is something that it's like biologically you either have one answer or the other. Okay.
Okay.
Male.
No, not that one.
Oh.
Okay, so cilantro. Does it taste good or does it
Cilantro.
taste like soap?
I think it's delicious.
How about our audience? Who tastes soap when they taste cilantro? There's some people. That's a thing.
Not me.
I don't
Kale
either.
now, that's another thing.
Ooh, yeah.
Can we just all just be honest and say kale tastes like bug spray?
It does. Like
mean,
it has to be really well seasoned to taste good.
I actually saw a can of bug spray that said made with real kale.
Really?
Yeah, so
I'm not 100% sure I believe you, but
Yeah.
I like do they have properties for killing bugs or something? No, you're
I'm
lying.
just saying
Maybe.
it tastes like bug spray.
All right. Well, I have really enjoyed having this conversation,
Yes.
guys. It's been really fun. And thank you, Caroline, for joining us. And
Thank
thank you, Pastor Eric, for
you.
joining us.
I'm excited to be
Welcome
here.
as our new youth pastor. Make sure you go up and say hi to her today or next week or whenever you see her. But yeah,
Thank
we'll see
you.
you guys later. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Here we go now. 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 Here we go now.
Good morning. I am so excited to be here. Do you hear this awesome crowd behind me? Welcome to Shoreline Church, guys, and to you online, welcome, welcome. I'm Kim Thornell, and I head up our Shine Women's Ministry. It teaches women about value, strength, and purpose, and I just want to give us a little shout out. This past week was our 4-year anniversary, and thank you. Thinking about where we started and where we are now, God is so good, and He moves. He really does. So a couple things before we get started with our message. Download the Shoreline app. If you have not done this yet, it is so crucial and important. You can follow along with today's message, but what I want to challenge you with today is to turn in a prayer request. So you would pull up the app and hit Get Connected and turn in that prayer request. The requests go to the lead team and to our prayer team, and it's all confidential. They're praying over you, and you want that spiritual backup in your life. So go on there now and send in that request. I promise you won't regret it, because God's gonna move. Lastly, get your phone out. Let's pull up your camera because you're gonna take a selfie. Yep, I'm doing one too. Here you go, crowd. Oh, that's gonna be such a good photo. Okay, so you're gonna post it online, check in wherever you're at. So if you're at home on your couch, you can hashtag Church Online, and if you're here, you can hashtag Shoreline Live. Now let's get ready to lean into the message. You know it's gonna be a good one, and I'll be back with you.
2020 promising, bat suit became a thing, election year, Epstein, Wuhan conspiracy, pandemic, quarantine, waiting for a vaccine, mask on, mask off, God forbid you need to go, homeschool, day, drink, Netflix, potty train, toilet paper out of stock, cooking meals around the clock, spring break never ends, social distance from your friends, Home Depot renovate, new diet overweight, Tiger King, what a shame, Carol Baskin is to blame, pandemic, no mistakes, murder, hornets, blind snakes, end of the world as we know it, it's the end of the world as we know it, it's the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine, I feel fine.
Dude, that's
That
a cool
song.
thing we've ever done.
Yeah, Dan Austin rewrote. Make sure if you come back or you tune in next week and you re-listen to the words on that, because it's like Carol Baskins is to blame.
How
Tiger
much
King.
fun was that to
Oh, it was
film?
awesome to film. Running through Destin dressed like Mad Max and stuff with toilet paper around my chest. I felt so.
I can tell, dude.
Yeah.
Testosterone is just, it's a bit much this morning, so we'll tone it down.
Weirdest thing I've ever smelled.
Yeah, good job on that morning show.
Thank you very much.
Dude, you got a personality
So
that
nervous.
just.
I was so nervous.
So Kim Thornell, who is doing our MC spot, she runs Hot Mess Salon out of the church, which is awesome. And you're like a frequent customer there.
I even went there during the pandemic.
Are you kidding me, bro? Don't
I
say
own
that.
a hair salon. I'm gonna.
Yeah.
It's like, come in, wear a mask, cut my hair.
So I went there one time, and
What for?
in the back, exactly.
Yeah.
She was like, have you ever thought about shampoo for men who are thinning? And I was like, I don't need this in my life. And then I also thought, I don't know how many thinning people we have out there. Is thinning a proactive thing, or can I grow hair back, or is it just keeping it there? You know what I mean? Does anybody know? If I start using hair growing shampoo, will this hair grow back, or is it just keep it from going out?
Probably just somewhere else. It'll grow back somewhere else. just
Yeah,
not in that
it's a
spot.
transfer of
Yeah,
energy.
Here.
Yeah, just get
here.
that lower back
Yeah.
carpet.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, it's kind of weird because I think everybody wanted to go back to normal, right? Isn't that was one of the things you said during the quarantine? Everybody said that. I think we've all said it. I'm ready for things to get back to normal.
Yep.
I don't think this week was what we meant. We got a tropical storm, we've had protests, we've had, all kinds of stuff. That's not the normal.
I know.
right?
It almost seems like we talked about it, how there's like compound hurt.
Yeah.
Like it just seems like one on top of another on top of another. It's like we can't even figure out. There's so many transitions. We don't even know what's going on right
Somebody posted a meme of Back to the Future, and Doc Brown was saying to Marty, never put 2020 in there, because nobody wants to go to 2020.
now. I know. We were complaining about 2019. 2020 is what watch this.
But, you know, for the most part, weren't we ready for things to get back to normal, right?
Yep.
But in light of what we've experienced, in light of what we talked about, what we've been learning, and everybody's been using this term, people are talking about the new normal, right? I mean, how many are tired of hearing that word, the new normal? I'm actually tired of it. I told my staff not to say that word anymore because it's everywhere. It's the new normal, the new normal. And some people, you know, you're talking about the new normal, but here's the thing. For new normal, some of it's going to be forced on us. I mean, some of the new normal is what people, whatever, because of what's happened, we're just going to be forced to do.
Yeah.
And so what we wanted to do with this series we're starting today is we wanted to talk about it because we wanted to pause and ask this question. Is there anything that we've learned during the quarantine, during the COVID thing? And if there is, what do we want to carry forward? Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we're calling this new series that we're starting today, it's The End of the World as We Know It. And we're calling it that because as soon as kind of the COVID hit the headlines, I remember you and I looked at each other like, this is probably the end.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
and so we just started to watch all of our like post-apocalyptic movies, not to enjoy, but more research.
To know what to
Yeah,
wear.
like what
After the
what
pandemic
exactly is
was
going to
over.
happen?
Like Mad Max, and
Yeah, so we thought it would look like this.
Yeah,
that our world would look.
we thought we would be dressed more like this.
Yeah, we were kind of disappointed, actually.
Yeah.
Well, we thought there would be a lot more fog and a lot fewer people.
Like Book of Eli or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Yeah. So we were kind of, and also if you've watched these movies, you know, each of these movies, there was a commodity that was very valuable. Anybody remember Mad Max? I know that was mostly in the 80s and 90s, but they did have a recent one in 2015. What was the commodity in Mad Max? Fuel, petrol, right? And in Waterworld, which was Kevin Costner, it was fresh water.
And jet skis.
Jet skis, yeah.
Yeah.
The Book of Eli was the Bible. Remember, they were trying to find the Bible. But we discovered it through this COVID quarantine that it would be none of these things. We discovered that actually in the future, everything will be bought and sold with this.
Whoa, bud.
Yeah, I know.
Dude, put
we
that
have
away.
armed guards that
Yeah,
are going to
bro, we're
escort
gonna
us
get
out of the
jumped.
building. Yeah, so when you do
It's
kidnappings...
only one ply. You don't want
Yeah,
this.
it's
one
only
ply.
one ply.
Yeah.
You get someone, kidnap someone, I want 500 unmarked rolls. Well, of course you want your rolls unmarked, right? So, but the reason why we called it...
Oh,
There it
man,
goes.
it's a tough morning, bro.
For,
We,
more,
we got to pick up the pace
for the
a
morning
little.
show, they sent me the questions and they said, "Did you review them?" And I said no, and they go, "Eric, you know your funny jokes that are spur of the moment always get you in trouble." And I was like, oh, "Okay."
I
So-
watched your face during the show trying to decide what you could or couldn't say.
especially about the smell part. But anyway, the reason why we called it the end of the world as we know it, because it is the end of the world as we know it. Now, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
It's just the end of the world as we know it.
Yep.
Because I hate the word new normal, but there are going to be some changes. And some of those changes are going to be forced upon us. We're not going to be able to help it. It's just things that we're going to have to do. But we really think that there's some of the changes need to come from us. Some of the changes need to come from you, from me, for our lives to make things better. So, and to not make those changes is to forget everything that you might have learned in those 2 months of quarantine.
Yeah, so we, especially during this series, we do this all the time. But we want to answer this question of how can we be better because of what has happened, which already is a little bit of an ambiguous question. Think about that word better, you know? We always say, hey, this year we want to be better than last year. But what does that mean? Like, what is our view of success, actually? If you're going to say you're better in 2020, what does that mean to you? Does that mean
Better husband.
better husband? Does that mean more money? Does that mean that you're more comfortable, right? Does that mean that you're setting yourself up for nothing bad to happen? So there's a Socrates quote that we use here all the time.
We do.
Mainly just to sound smart. Yeah. But it's the unexamined life is not worth living. And the way we say it is that experience doesn't make you wiser. We've all had crazy experience these past couple
Some
months.
experiences can make you dead.
Yeah, exactly.
so-
Yeah. Experience makes you older
Yeah.
and more wrinkly.
Or scars.
Yeah, but it
scars.
doesn't necessarily make you wiser. Examined experience
That's right.
makes you wiser.
Yeah.
When you actually learn from something. And so we've just realized we have had a season where I think all of us have some life lessons, some things that we can actually make pivotal life decisions and decide our normal routine and our disciplines will change because of what we've learned, but only if we examine it.
That's right. So, what is you actually have a
Oh,
from C.S. Lewis you wanted to read to us that kind of talks about this?
yeah, because we're on the C.S. Lewis kick
And Socrates, yeah.
and Socrates.
C.S. Lewis, have anybody heard of C.S. Lewis? He's like the Chick-fil-A of authors. You know, he's not quite Christian, but it's pretty Christian, you know.
Wow.
Name. Okay, no, we won't do that one again.
Okay, yeah, cut that one too.
Yeah, okay.
We're gonna hit though, dude, and when we hit, this place is gonna go nuts.
Where's the laugh thing? Okay, there we go.
Okay, here it is. So there's one thing that Eric had said earlier, which I think is a great line, is he said that pain without gain is a shame, which I love that.
That was coming up. You just gave it away.
Okay, pain without gain is a shame, just meaning we've all experienced discomfort in this past season. We've had pain, but if we just let it be painful, then we're not learning anything. How do we adjust because of that, right?
Oh, I did miss it.
That's
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
So C.S. Lewis says in his book, The Problem of Pain, he says, my own experience is something like this. We can all relate to this. My own experience is something like this. I am progressing along the path of life in my ordinary, contentedly fallen and godless condition, absorbed in a merry meeting with my friend for the morrow or a bit of work that tickles my vanity. Just meaning, all right, I'm chugging along. Is my life great? Not necessarily. Do I have some self-destructive patterns? Probably. Do I have some addictions that are causing me pain? Yes. But you know what? I know this life. This is the known life. Even
normal.
the things. It's
The normal.
It's the normal, right?
Yeah.
I'm comfortable here. I have predictable pain inside of this. When suddenly a stab of abdominal pain that threatens serious disease, or a headline in the newspapers that threaten us all with destruction, kind of
How timely is that, yeah.
sends this whole pile of cards tumbling down. All of a sudden, you have that spike, right, in the EKG. You have that moment that's like, oh my gosh, you're faced with my normal is being disrupted, and there's like this calamity that is facing you. At first, I'm overwhelmed, and all my little happinesses look like broken toys. The normal doesn't look so great. Then suddenly and reluctantly, bit by bit, I try to bring myself into the frame of mind that I should be in at all times. And perhaps by God's grace, I succeed, and for a day or two, tops, become a creature consciously dependent on God and drawing its strength from the right sources.
So this kind of shocks you into like, this is what I should have been doing all along, being dependent upon God. Suddenly my priorities are becoming more clear.
Exactly. You have clarity on your decisions, clarity on what's important in life. But he says the moment the threat is withdrawn, the moment you feel either that the threat isn't there or the person takes the threat away, we've all experienced this. Maybe there's somebody watching or somebody in here that it's all fun and games and it's all about comfort and your way until your spouse says, I'm leaving you and I'm taking the kids, right? And you have kind of that moment where you see your decisions in crystal clear perspective and you're realizing that your selfishness that didn't seem like a big deal is resulting in something much more serious. And it's at that moment that you say, okay, I'm going to change, right? This, whatever this isn't worth losing my family over. And to C.S. Lewis's point, you have a day or two where you're like, okay, I see things clearly. But all of a sudden, 2 days go by and your wife or your husband doesn't make that threat and you kind of feel like it's not there anymore, and what happens? We just slip back into our old normal.
The moment the threat is removed,
Yep.
you kind of retreat to your old ways.
Yep.
Or maybe, when you were a single woman and you find out you're pregnant, or you think you're pregnant and oh my gosh, your world comes crashing in. Suddenly, all the religious kind of things that you grew up with come crashing back into your life. Maybe you hadn't prayed in a long time, so you start praying. Maybe you beg God, or you make a promise to God, and you promise to change, and then you discover that you aren't pregnant, and you're so relieved. But for a while you were a different person. For a while you kind of behaved yourself, and you stepped back into the standards that you'd once embraced growing up for a while. But then, the moment the threat is withdrawn, you kind of drift back to your old normal. Or maybe you're my age, and you go to the doctor, and the story goes like this. You get that physical, and your doctor says, hey, look, we've talked about this before. If you don't change your ways, you're not going to get to play with your grandkids, and you certainly won't get to, you might not even be able to watch your daughter get married. And suddenly it shocks you. So he gets your attention. You go up, you go home, you start dieting, you exercise, you feel better. People are saying, oh, you look great. How much weight have you lost? And you do feel better about it, and you stick with it for a while, but then what happens? The moment the threat is withdrawn, and then what do? You drift back to the old normal. And I don't know, maybe your story is like that, or maybe it could be any story. But the thing about these stories is, it just makes me wonder, what's wrong with us?
Yeah.
Why do we have to be led to the brink of disaster?
How can we not keep perspective?
Yeah, before we're willing to make the changes that we know we need to make, but it takes being led to the brink of disaster to do it.
Well, C.S. Lewis continues. Here's how he finishes this idea. It says, but the moment the threat is withdrawn, my whole nature leaps back to the toys, right? To the normal, to the comfort. God has had me but for 48 hours. And then only by dint of taking everything else away from me. Just the ultimate threat was the only way that he even got my attention. Let him but sheath that sword for a moment, meaning let me just sense that threat is not there. Let me just sense that everything won't come crashing down. And I behave like a puppy when the hated bath is over. I shake myself as dry as I can and race off to reacquire my comfortable dirtiness.
I love that term, comfortable dirtiness. It's like you said, it's something that's normal. It may be bad for me, but I'm comfortable there. It's enough dirt in my life to not kill me, but I'm comfortable there. Yeah. And anybody have a dog? You know what it's like when you dry your dog off and then you let him out of the shower, and what does he do? They head right to carpet. Mine loves dead fish. I don't know what that is, but start rolling in it.
So do my kids.
And this is what C.S. Lewis says. Like the dog that just gets loose, suddenly we're going back into that.
Yeah, the comfortable dirtiness is a lot of people feel like the pain of the known is more comforting or less scary than the unknown. Even if the unknown is something that God has called us into freedom, that just seems so intimidating as opposed to this comfortable dirtiness. So he continues, reacquire my comfortable dirtiness, if not in the nearest manure heap. Actually, that's more like my kids.
Yeah.
At least in the nearest flower bed.
Yeah, see, here's the thing, and we all know this. It's human nature to want to return back to the habits that we once associated with the. It's human nature to want to go back to those habits that we had, that we associate with the pain once the pain is gone. Mm-hmm. In other words, it's human nature to want to go back to whatever your normal was. And since we're coming out of this COVID thing, we're almost out. You might be watching online somewhere where you're still in quarantine. But when we're coming out of it, our human nature is to go back to what we used to do. But come on, aspiring to normal isn't very inspiring, is it? Yes, who wants to aspire? Who wants their goals to be just to be normal?
Right.
So instead, what we're asking is, how can we be better for what we've experienced? You've heard the saying, don't let a good thing go to waste, right? So really what we're saying is, let's not let a bad thing go to waste. Yeah. In fact, we think it's not too soon to begin to ask some questions, okay? To have this discussion while it's fresh, is to begin to take inventory and to begin to ask this question. And here's the question. What have I been doing that almost led to my undoing? Mm-hmm. In other words, what was I doing in life that when I got into this 2 months where I didn't have a job or wasn't getting a paycheck, that almost led to my undoing? Or the flip side of that is, what should I begin doing that I should have been doing all along?
Yep.
And so that's kind of what we want to kick off in this discussion today. And so for the next few weeks, we're going to pick 3 topics. We've picked 3 topics that we want to talk about that probably you experienced during this time of quarantine. And I'm just going to admit, we're going to be honest with you, the first 2 are going to be very challenging. And I love what you said last week. Graham said, look, here at Shoreline, we believe that the word should not be confusing, but it should be challenging. If you're sitting in here or you're watching online, you didn't get to go to AJ's today or Crab Island and you're here now or you're watching online, we want this to be challenging to you. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 3 areas in the next 3 weeks. Today we're going to talk about our finances.
Yep.
And then next week we're going to talk about your relationships because there was some things that you probably discovered, good or bad, when you were stuck at home with your kids for 2 months, right?
Yeah.
That you're not a good teacher, correct?
Or father.
Yeah. And a husband, don't forget that. And then the last week, we're going to look at our worldview. And so they're going to be challenging, but it might feel like we're even meddling.
Yeah, but challenging, remember, is a good thing.
Yeah.
I like when you said the idea of going back to normal. For a lot of us, normal means comfortable.
Yeah.
And very rarely do we grow closer to God in the middle of comfort.
Yeah.
You know, because if we're comfortable, we don't have that much dependence
Yeah.
on God. It becomes we can be independent. I've got this figured out. And so if nothing else, during this time, God has shaken us loose and said, maybe this is a new way of life. Not just so you can settle back in, but so this idea of challenge and discomfort become a way of life that you can lean into what God has.
Yeah, it really goes back to what I should have said before, is that if there was pain that you experienced during this time of quarantine, to have pain and not have gain would be a shame.
Yep.
To have pain and not learn from it would be a shame.
Yep.
So what are we going to be talking about first?
Yep, so this week is finances, and our goal is to start conversation. We are not obviously going to tell anybody what the right decisions are ever financially. In fact, that is going to span the spectrum. Everybody's family has different values, and the way that you guys spend money, things that you buy, all that is different, but we do think that we're going to have some good questions to kind of highlight the motives behind how we're spending.
That's right. So the first question is, how can you be better for what you've experienced during the quarantine financially? You know, what have you been doing that almost led to your undoing financially? What financial habit may have caught up with you during that 2 months when you were out of work or you couldn't go into work or when you work at home? So another way we could do is, what do you wish that you would have been doing financially? And even as I mentioned that, some of you have already thought of this. Some of you, when you were sitting at home for 2 months, you thought, wow, I wish I'd done this. And so here's what our challenge is going to be today, is whatever you think of, either have already thought of, or when we talk today, whatever comes to mind, that you'd begin to do that now. Because now is the time to face up to the financial realities that we want to talk about. And if you will press through the pressure that you might be feeling, you will be better off for it. So we want to look at a financial reality that looms large for most of us, and that maybe when I know some people got paid, but some people you were out of a job, or you had to wait till the tourist season started, and you got your $1,200 check, but it didn't carry you over for 2 months. Go figure, right? Yep. But for some of us, it may be something that that got us in trouble when we're out of work. So the first reality we want to look at is this: I want is better than I owe. I want is better than I owe. Now, if you've been here at Shoreline, you've heard us talk about this before. We actually got that phrase from Andy Stanley. And what he says, this is what he means, that it's better to go without things that you don't need than to owe money on things that you don't need, okay? And it's better to go without things that you don't need, there's a tension there, than to owe money on things that you don't need, and there's a tension there. So either way, there's going to be a tension. But what we want to talk about, and what Andy talks about, is that I owe is far worse than the tension of I want.
Yeah, if you feel the pressure of I want, which we've all seen something that we want, and yeah, there's a feeling there. But you want to talk about a burden? The burden is when you're under that grip of I owe.
Yeah.
That feels like a burden. I want is manageable. I owe almost feels like this is insurmountable.
Especially when you have no income coming in, then that pressure changes. And we're not here to tell you that, you can't have a boat, or, you shouldn't buy things, because, I like boats, and I want a truck to pull it with a Yeti 110 filled up with silver bullets. Right?
Now we're talking, buddy. That's what we needed to get this crowd on our side.
So what we want to do is I want to go to a scripture, and it's written by Solomon, and I'm telling you right now that it's the book of Proverbs, and he gives us a word picture that's not very relevant to our culture right now, because it's like 3,000 years old. But it's a very powerful word picture from back then, but I think that it applies to this idea of self-control when it comes to, hey, I want is better than I owe. And here's what he wrote in Proverbs chapter 28. Here's what he said. He said, like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. Let me read this again, because again, it might be for you, this sounds meaningless, which means it has no meaning. I know we're getting deep in here, yeah.
Tweet that.
He says, like a city meaningless, that is a good tweet. Meaningless means without meaning. Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control. So you got to picture this. In ancient times, the walls around a city represented security, they represented peace, they represented prosperity and safety. And so when an enemy would come in, they would find the weakest part of a wall, and they would use weapons of siege warfare to kind of break the wall down, and then have a breach in the wall, and then they would flow into pour into the city. So here's what the writer's saying, that a city, when the walls are broken through, the people that are in there, in that city, they lose their security.
Yep.
They lose their safety. They lose their autonomy. They lose the ability to control their lives. And here's what he's saying. This is his point. That a lack of self-control leads to a loss of control.
And that's when we said that we want to go with the motive. We want to go with that phrase or that word self-control more than the actual purchase or the decision.
That's right.
Different people, there's so much individuality inside of this, right? Different people have different family values. You guys are a boating, fishing family. You like to host on the boat. And so
Well, it's only because Jesus' favorite people are fishermen. I mean, isn't that the first people he called?
yeah, how many men have you caught lately? Bible joke. Okay. But anyway, point is that makes sense for you, where for somebody else, that purchase would be maybe a lack of self-control or an impulse buy. So we would never show a list of things that you should or shouldn't purchase because there's so much individuality in here. But when you were talking about the city with the walls, what I thought of is in this time, we are prioritizing, or at least we have clarity on what we value the most, right? So we want to, in this time, fortify our boundaries around the things that we call the most important. When we don't have clarity, when we don't have perspective, it seems like because we don't have boundaries, we're making decisions in the moment. Nothing is fortified, nothing is safe. In fact, we couldn't actually in that moment say what we value.
Yeah.
But since we have clarity right now, more than maybe ever before, we deem what's important and we say, what are the walls and boundaries, in this case financially, that we're going to set to fortify around the things that we deem the most important?
Yeah, and a lack of self-control usually leads to a loss of control. Have you noticed this? Like, say it's New Year's and you decide to get your life together finally, and you start working out. And when you get discipline in one area of your life, don't you find that it seems to translate into other areas? You become disciplined in working out. You find it easier to read your Bible, maybe get on a budget financially, eat right. It starts to translate.
Yep.
So this idea that self-control actually will lead to, in one area, will lead to self-control over your whole life.
Right.
But the inverse is true, right? Is that when you find yourself with a lack of self-control in one area,
permeates.
it's easy to affect other areas, and it usually leads to a loss of control.
Yeah, the idea of control also, because, how many different stories are there here because of what happened with COVID? But if we say, hey, control, and it's like, control? Like,
Yeah.
This thing hit me like a ton of bricks. There's only so much I can control. And if we talk about control being the goal, then you say, well, I'm going to make it so that next time I have as much money as possible. Generous, forget that. I'm going to control and hoard so that I can look out for number one. And so there is an unhealthy side of control where all of a sudden you're just fearful, right, of the worst case scenario. But the good side of control means to say that you are in control of your values and your priorities and your boundaries. And right now is the time to set those before the next calamity hits.
That's
and
right.
you find yourself in a city with no protecting walls.
Because it's too easy to blame the economy or the virus or your job on the situation that you ended up in that 2 months, when really part of it, we have to take some of the responsibility for that. And so what we're saying is during this time, when you have the clarity, because it's fresh right now.
Right.
A lot of people don't want to look at this. I just want to go back to normal. But look at what puts you in that situation that you can control. Not what you can't control, but what you can control.
Exactly.
And make those changes now. Because here's something that you've probably heard, or maybe you heard this in the past. Maybe someone's given you this advice. Maybe you read it in a book. Maybe you took Financial Peace University. Anybody heard of that with Dave Ramsey? And the advice was that you should set aside 3 to 6 months of living expenses and set it aside for emergency. Have you heard that?
I've heard that.
Have it for in case something like this happens. Now, here's a hunch. that the first time you heard that, you probably thought to yourself, that's a good idea. That makes sense. Set aside 3 to 6 months of living expenses in case an emergency comes up. And if you took that advice, which requires extraordinary self-control, then you're probably better off for what we just went through. Maybe you might not be better off financially, but maybe you didn't. It was just a speed bump to you. But if you heard this before, about 3 to 6 months living expenses, and you didn't take that advice, and then suddenly your industry was shut down for 2 months, you probably wish that you would have taken that advice. Now is the time to make a plan to set money aside in case, and I don't even want to say in case, I'm going to say when there's another financial bump, so that when your walls are attacked, they will not be broken through because you use self-control to create an emergency fund that prepared you for your future. Because remember, an emergency fund, that kind of emergency fund, requires extraordinary self-control.
Yeah. We have said here before that God doesn't want us to do life for him, that God wants us to do life with him, right? His desire, he's designed us for relationship. Like he has created you for that, beyond anything you will ever do for God. Or he just like, man, I just want to know you. I want to walk alongside you. And so I thought every area of our life, especially the unexamined one, God is saying, is there an area of your life that you haven't invited me into? Right? Yeah. And that's why we don't want to patronize anybody here by saying, you know, here's the way you should do it, because how many different stories just in this room or watching do we have? There are some people who are crippled by this. There's some people who it wasn't that big of a deal. We don't know, but God does. He knows exactly what's going on in your story right now. He knows exactly what's going on with your finances. And his desire is not that you would make financial decisions for him, but that he would be invited in on that. That he actually, think about how much of our weekly life is dictated by financial decisions.
That's right.
So we think about what to buy, what not to buy, what to give, what not to. Everything is. And so if we have this huge piece of our pie chart of life that God's not invited into, he's saying, man, this is something I've created you to interact with me on. So we just wanted to say, we wanted to introduce the concept of self-control, some questions for the motive, actually for you to invite God in on. Yeah. And for you to start being open-handed and saying, God, would you kind of dictate or highlight different things for my mindset to grow?
Because as we come out of this COVID thing, while it's fresh, this is the time that you want to, whatever you thought, I wish I would have done this before this happened, now is the time to put it in place for when it happens again. And I say when, not if, because if you're one of the people that you live in Destin and your job is based on tourism, the weather, the beaches, the real estate, I'm telling you that it will happen again. Just in the last 15 years since I've moved back here, this is my hometown, all you have to go do is go back to Hurricane Ivan in 2004, Hurricane Dennis in 2005, which came in July and ruined the rest of our tourist season. Then you had the real estate bubble, the mortgage crisis. Then you had the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010, which is 10 years ago, and then COVID-19. And every single time that the people who were not prepared financially, you know what they said? Nobody could have seen this coming. But if you listen to the advice of Solomon and you listen to advice to other people in the Bible, there's a guy named Joseph in the Old Testament, read his story in Genesis. He saw the famine coming. He knew what to do. I'm telling you, the one who has self-control, who's able to say, okay, what can I begin to do now that will prepare me for this? Because this will not be the last time something like this happens.
Yeah, my wife, who's one of the most generous people I know, who teaches me all the time in this, when something happens, to be completely honest, I'm like a logic first guy, and Kristen has no logic.
None whatsoever.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
Tell
that story about the donkey. No, let's don't do that one.
But she would say, like, don't just look at the numbers. Like, if we're gonna fall on something, let's fall on these values that God has given us.
That's right.
Right? And so even us as a church, this has not been like, hey, just money flowing everywhere, but we've said at the beginning, we're going to be a church that continues to be generous, and we, the church, meaning us, like all of us have decided, hey, we're going to lean in. When everybody else is hoarding and controlling, we're going to lead with irrational generosity.
Yeah.
You gotta
Hoarding
get the
toilet paper.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that was just to say that this whole thing isn't a logic, get your numbers right type of thing. It is to get with God and to determine what God has given you as a value.
And I wasn't going to say this, but I'll just go ahead and say it for transparency. In 2010, when we had the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, how many were here for that?
Yeah.
You know, we laid off all our staff. We were not prepared for that. And I promised myself that next time something like this happens, we were going to be prepared. And for our church and for our home, be personally better prepared than we were in 2010. And I'm telling you, the preparation made a difference. Because of that, during COVID, when everybody was hoarding and holding on to, as a church and as a family, we were able to be generous.
Mm-hmm.
You know, every week, because of your giving, because you know that as well, we were able to feed people. We fed the boat captains, and I don't want to keep harping on that, but that's the difference with this kind of mentality. When you take this view, how can I be ready? It frees you up to be somebody, because here's what happens. What does God say? Those I can trust with little, they'll be trusted with more. We go into a time of famine, and when you're generous, giving things away, guess what God does? He continues to give you more so that you can be a blessing to other people. Mm-hmm. But when you're just trying to hold on and survive and you can't be generous, I mean, you're not able to do that because of that mentality. So you've got to set yourself up for the next time that happens so God can use you in an incredible way as well. So here's what we want to do. You tell them about what we're going to be offering. And this is not something that we want from you. This is what we want for you, because we want a stronger community to live in.
So we're offering Financial Peace University, which is great. If you've ever been through it, you know how important it is. And again, it just exposes those areas inside of finances, which everybody rolls their eyes, is like, but actually it can be an area of freedom. It can be an area of growth, an area where you start to feel alive in when you're partnering with God for. It's starting June 14th. You got to download the Shoreline app and sign up there. 6-week course.
And it's going to be all done online through Zoom. So you don't have to go to someone's house, so there's no reason why you can't do it. And this is part of, because even I love going back and reviewing the Financial Peace University, because I find myself drifting back to old habits, the old normal, right? The dirty messiness.
Yeah.
What was it, the phrase that he used? But what it does is this helps keep me on track so that I can have this new normal of finances.
That's good, dude.
So we encourage you to sign up for that. And listen, this is not something that we are trying to get something from you. It's something that we want for you.
Yeah, this is supposed to be an area of freedom.
Yeah.
Right.
So next week, we're about to go into worship, by the way. The band is back. So we're going to have some worship. Next week, we're going to be dealing with relationships, because some of you were locked away with your family, and that COVID quarantine either exposed cracks in your relationships with your children or with your spouse, or it showed you what you were doing right. You know, I heard a lot of people saying, it was so nice to walk in the afternoons with my family. Well, why would you want to give that up just because things go back to normal? So we're going to be talking about that next week.
That's good. Would you pray for
Let's
us?
pray. Father, we thank you so much for your word, the words of Solomon, how wise they are about self-control. And Lord, I know all of us have different areas where we're thinking where our walls might be thin and where we could get more self-control in that area. So Lord, I thank you that you speak to us, every one of us, you speak to us individually. And Lord, that we would recognize that this is an opportunity to come in closer in line with your will for us. Because we say it as a church, it's not what we want from you, it's what we want for them. But we know that's your heart. It's not what you want from us, it's what you want for us. So Lord, I thank you for speaking to every one of us individually as we move through this week, because we do not want the pain that we experienced during COVID to go in vain. It would be a shame that I rhyme so well when I pray. In Jesus' name. You know it.
In Jesus' name, you're killing it.
I know. I wasn't trying. I was a poet and didn't know it. Amen, right?
Amen.
Hey, thanks, you guys. I hope you come back next week. The weather's good. We'll have Crab Island back out, and we'll also have AJ's. And so take it away, Kim.
That's right.
Got to turn your mic on.
Sorry, guys. Our culture here has always been to create irresistible environments, to change people's perception of God by changing their perception of church. And we get to hear people's stories every single week of how easy it was for them to connect with God, and often for the very first time. Because of you, we were able to bring Jesus and his church to the front and center of everyday life. Actually, this month, every time this message is shared on Facebook, we are going to donate $5 to Convoy of Hope. So thank you. So share, so we can really help them out. They have mastered supporting communities all over by feeding children, helping with outreach, and helping with disaster response. We are praying and speaking life over a very calm hurricane season, but so glad that we can partner with Convoy of Hope for what they do best. Thank you so much to those of you who have already given online or who have set up recurring giving, and for being faithful with your consistency so that we can count on you to continue to help other people. Anyone can give today. You'll see the ways that you can give on the screen. And if you're in the house today, the team is ready to pass the buckets now. Now, don't forget, we believe in irrational generosity here. So if you're an adult in need of food, shelter, or clothing, you are welcome to take any cash as the buckets are passed by. Now make sure you stick around and worship with us.
We're heaven's fine creations, His pride and adoration, treasures woven by His love. His careful hands they hold us, safe within His promise of calling and of destiny.
of the power of the invite. I remember the first time that I was invited to church and that sense of belonging that it created. And with so many options, your invite is sure to be irresistible. We have Sunday morning live, church online, church at AJ's, and church at Crab Island. Friends, it's going to be an incredible week. See you next time.